Hello.
Hey, how's it going there, Salma?
Good. How are you?
Great, thank you for dialing in. Are you calling in from New York or are you back in Canada?
Yes, I literally just landed in New York like right now, like an hour ago.
Welcome. JFK, LaGuardia, or Long Island Republic?
LaGuardia. That's what I usually end up landing or going to. That's like my go-to. Yeah.
No wonder you need a comfort animal right now to deal with
Yeah.
it. LaGuardia is terrible. But thank
He's
you.
oh no, sorry. I was just saying he's being extra clingy because I've been away. So
I can imagine, but I appreciate you taking the time because just on the road and you had people talking because the Chelsea Handler dates and you have this new album in a week and a half. Kind of a very busy month for you, wouldn't you say?
yeah, super busy. Yeah, and I'm really, really grateful like that there's so much happening. But also like just super tired. I'm in a couple of writers' rooms right now as well, but those are wrapping up. So I think maybe in like a couple of weeks, a lot more time will open up for me, hopefully.
Sure. So
Yeah.
what made you move to New York? Was it to be in those writers' rooms?
Yeah, I think like I had gotten into the writers' rooms when I was still in Toronto, but I guess, and everything's kind of virtual right now, but I guess in my mind, I was like, okay, I want to be able to, first of all, I had to quit my engineering job to be able to like work in the writer's room.
Right.
And so that made me be like, okay, well, if I'm gonna be broken at home in Toronto, I might as well just be broken at home in New York. And their comedy scene is massive. It's so great here. And I really, really wanted to cultivate stand-up. Because I feel like it's opened a lot of doors for me. And so that's kind of what made me move to New York. And also I was hoping that, I could use the momentum from the room that I'm in right now and just moving there to kind of maybe get me into other writers' rooms and stuff. So yeah, so that was kind of like my plan.
You mentioned the engineer part, not me. It's a focus of the
Yeah.
documentary about you. Do you know the other engineer, former engineer in comedy, Brooks Wheelan? Did the two engineers know each other?
Brooks Wheelan? No, I don't think I've heard of them.
He was on SNL for one season and
Okay.
then I guess became more of a full-time podcaster stand-up. But if you ever see that name, you'll commiserate over the engineer thing.
Okay, yeah. There are a few of us actually. Leonard Chan in Toronto is also an engineer or former engineer rather. What else? I think there's a couple of other people who are also former engineers. But yeah, it's not that uncommon to just like study for so long and then leave your career completely for something else.
Right. Well, when exactly did this become a full-time career for you in comedy, not like the fun thing that you were still doing 30 to 40 hours a week for fun?
Right. Yeah, it was in November officially when I left my engineering job for this writer's room. But it was wild. Like it definitely built up because before, I think if you had found me in like 2018, I would have been like, oh no, comedy's for fun, like never gonna do it for full time. Nope, no. And I was also still trying to like fit the conservative mold that I grew up in. Like I was like, oh no, like family comes first. And like I'm not that like one negates the other, but for some reason I was like taught that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of like, no, like I'm gonna be domesticated and like, like comedy's not actually gonna be a real thing. And then I think like last year was when I was like, or maybe like 2020 or 2021, where I was like, yeah, like the goal definitely is to do this full time, but I don't know when I'm gonna make that call. And I wasn't in a hurry either. Like I really liked what I had going on, which was like I was doing my engineering job, which had a really good work-life balance. And also I was working on like writing, screenwriting, taking
Mm-hmm.
acting lessons, like whatever, all that kind of stuff, and doing my stand-up shows. And so I was like, okay, we have a pretty good system. But then also, yeah, in November, what had happened as well was I got into the writer's room, but around that time or right before that time, my engineering job was trying to make me like ramp up and take on more initiatives. And I was like, no, I cannot be ramping up right now. I need to be winding down. Like
Right.
I cannot, yeah. And because at the same time, it was like I got the writer's room and then I got into another room and then I had my job, the engineering job, and then I was recording my album. So I was like, this is too much. Like I feel like I operate at the capacity of like maybe 3 to 4 people. But at that point I was like, no, I can't even like, when the busyness becomes like super stressful.
Oh
So
yeah.
Yeah, I like to operate between like an 80 to 90% busy, but this was like beyond 90%. So I was like, I can't do this.
I hear you. As someone who just stupidly decided, hey, I'm going to write another book while holding down the
Amazing.
day gig, while doing all the interviews. Why am I doing that? I don't know. You have to. You feel
Right.
like you have to. I assume that's the case for you. When someone goes, well, why did you take on that extra work? You had to.
Yeah, and it gives you something to do, and it gives you something to look forward to, and it helps me at least focus on what's in my control, as opposed to, because a lot of times in this industry, and I felt that a lot earlier, like maybe a couple of years ago, and being in the lockdown too in Toronto and stuff, a lot of times like you get into this just like sulking phase, you're like, because you're just like waiting on things to happen. You're like, when it, like so many of my friends are just like, when am I gonna get my big break? When am I gonna get, like, you know what I mean? That's like a lot of the sentiment. So I try not to dwell in that energy, because I find it just disempowering. So instead I'm like, okay, time to work on a new project. Time to just keep working on projects until something lands. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's kind of, and then also just trying to add more to my portfolio, like introducing brand new skills that I haven't ever done before, like acting, for example, or whatever.
Oh yeah, well that actually goes towards something I'm super curious about, because I grew up way too young. I was watching stand-up comedy because my dad would have it on, and he'd have on Comic Strip Live, which I don't know if you had that on in Canada, and it's probably before your time, but it was like early 90s, kind of up against SNL and Saturday Night Live. It was like comedian in front of the brick wall doing the 5-minute set in front of like a fake club audience. And there was a few of those shows that we had there. So it was like, that was my early exposure to comedy. And all those stand-ups are pretty much just stand-up comics. That's all they did. And I think the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow was getting to Vegas and Atlantic City and casinos, and that's it. And today's grade of comics, they're also actors. They're also in the writer's room. They're also trying to get a screenplay off the ground and producing. For you, was the comedy the first love and the writing fell into your lap, or you were a writer who evolved into comedy?
No, I definitely started in comedy. It's so interesting because I never watched stand-up at all growing up, but I did watch sketch. I watched SNL, and I watched Whose Line Is It Anyway? So that's like improv. I love that. And that was like my first like thing that drew me towards comedy. And I remember when I was in university, I watched College Humor, like videos on YouTube, which I loved so much. But then, and I actually didn't like watching stand-up maybe when I was really young, because I didn't understand it. And I remember like when my brother would watch Seinfeld and then the stand-up parts would come on, I'd be like, oh my God, boring. Like literally get back to the main show. I would be so annoyed. But then, yeah, basically like, I think it was someone in the industry who had recommended that I start stand-up. And I was like, that is terrifying. Like, I wouldn't wish that upon my enemy. Like, why would I do that? But then I had started, I think, like I started doing comedy in end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And sorry, my cat sometimes crazy.
It happens. It's a cat.
But I remember like, I think starting to watch comedy with like Russell Peters and then Louis C.K. and some of those comics. And I just thought that like their writing and their delivery was just so brilliant. And then I went to my first ever stand-up show where I saw like Trevor Noah, and I watched Ali Wong's Netflix special, which was so good. But yeah, before then I hadn't really seen much. And then when I did stand-up, when I started doing stand-up and I started to get sort of interest from the industry, they asked me, they were like, okay, now what? And I was like, I don't know. Like when I'm at production companies,
when are you going to do just for laughs? When are you going to get us your spec script about what it's like to be you?
Literally, they were like, well, do you have like anything you want to write? Like, do you have any whatever show ideas? And I was like, oh. And then I started to think about it, and then I started to think about it. So that was like in the summer of 2019. So I started to think about it for a bit. And then I met a friend of mine who had already kind of started her writing career in LA. And she kind of helped me like get started on writing something. And then from there, I started to meet other people and get involved in other projects where people really knew what they were doing and they could teach me a lot more. And so yeah, so definitely comedian turned writer, which I know some people like scoff at, but
I'm not going to scoff at that. I think that's cool that you learned it your own way, but it's also fascinating to me because let's say, to use a musical analogy, if you Blink 182 is your favorite band,
right.
and or Green Day, and then
Okay.
you never went back and you learned about the Ramones or the Sex Pistols or like the stuff before that. So you went with like 1998 forward and you
Right.
didn't get that old stuff. So in your case, it wasn't like Rodney Dangerfield and Woody Allen and Don Rickles and the Vegas stuff. You just kind of went to the good modern stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's literally exactly it. And I haven't even watched a lot of the, the classic stand-ups. Like I think the first time I ever got high in my life was like last year, not last year, the year before, like end of 2020. And then my friend was like make sure you watch stand-up, like comedy, it'll be so funny. So then I watched Eddie Murphy's Delirious for the first time.
Sure.
One bit where he talks about ice cream and I was like, I need ice cream immediately right now. I need ice cream. But yeah, that was my first time watching like Eddie Murphy, for example. I mean, obviously I know him from acting and I know him from, like Shrek, for example, and whatever. And
Right.
he's acted in, but I think that was like my first time watching his stand-up. Even Dave Chappelle, like I feel like I'd gone in on watching him pretty late and stuff. So there's still so much for me to discover. Like there's still a lot for me to watch.
That must be exciting and terrifying to know that you're eventually going to encounter some old timer comics in the club and they're going to go, that's a Mort Saul joke. And you're like,
right. What? I already hear that a lot. Like I already hear like, this is George Carlin or whatever. Like I already hear that, yeah. But then I'm just like, I don't know white references, but I'm so used to that. I'm so used to that because growing up, like we weren't allowed to listen to music. So like when people reference like the Beatles or whatever, I'm just like, I don't know this. I don't know. It's all over my head. Like
but you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I've made peace with it because it's just kind of like, what am I going to learn all of the history of pop culture? Like I could, but I actually am just so busy. And I'm also trying to do that because it means so much to me personally. I'm trying to do that with like Arabic film and especially Egyptian films and plays and music. And like there's so many classical singers from like the 60s and 70s that are just so amazing that I'm trying to like kind of get more in touch with my roots and all of that. So it definitely is a little bit of an acquired taste if you didn't grow up like being introduced to it. And it takes time to like get into it and also catch up on everything. And the songs, for example, the Arabic songs back then were like an hour long. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But my friend was telling me like, I went on tour with Chelsea Handler and her assistant was telling me like, you should just pick an era and just like dive in, like just pick, one decade and just dive in and listen to everything and then like go to the next one. Like she's trying to like tell me to like break it down to actually do that, which I think I will. Like I definitely want to for sure.
She's right. Something with Chelsea that I think is awesome is that who she is on stage is nothing like who she is off stage, where on stage she's in battle mode. Do not ever heckle her. You don't want to be in the first 3 rows. You don't want to taunt her on social media. But she's supposedly, what I hear, heart of gold to other comics, always helping her family, etc.
Yeah, she's really, really sweet. I don't know if I really see that much of like a disconnect between her on stage and in real life. Like to me, I feel like she is still very graceful on stage, even when she's dealing with hecklers. And even if she is like aggressive with someone, it's probably like a man, like, do you know what I mean? and then if she is aggressive to a man, it's just like she kind of like isolates him from the rest of the audience, which I think is really smart, because I think a lot of times when calling out hecklers, like comedians will turn against the whole audience, and it's like, that's a bad idea. You need them on your side, you know what I mean? But for the most part, she puts up with a lot. I felt like she put up with a lot. Like I was like, other comics, at least like other ones that I'd seen on stage who, even watching like other celebrity comedians had way less tolerance. So it was like interesting to see that, but she does definitely shut down her hecklers. Like nobody needs to worry about that. But yeah, in person, like afterwards, she's a lot more chill. And she's just like really, really nice. And yeah, just super chill. I would I would describe her as very easygoing, very chill. And I got to meet her friend at the end of the Ottawa show, and yeah, she just has, for me it was actually really cool to see that she has a very down-to-earth life, and she's very open about it. Like it's not like anything is secretive. Like she loves skiing in Whistler, and she tells everyone that, and she's always posting about it, and she talks about it in her stand-up, and she genuinely just does that. Like they were filled with like skiing stories. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I was like, oh, this is great. Cause I think like, I don't know much about the industry, you know, and like, I don't come from a community or, you know, like a family that knows anything about this industry. Nobody around us knew anything about this industry. So in my mind, I think I got really scared of it. Like I was like, oh, the more you grow, the more isolated you'll be from your loved ones or people or whatever. But it wasn't like that. Like through witnessing Chelsea and how she lives her life and how people perceive her and how she goes about her day and stuff, it seemed really normal and great. So I was like, oh yay. I mean, not that I'll ever get as big as Chelsea, but it's just good to know that, you know, your life is not over basically, in the way that people like describe fame, but there's different levels, I guess, you know what I mean?
When you say never, you mentioned when you say never be as famous, and I just said never say never, Russell Peters became world famous without even trying. You know, his video thing went viral without him knowing on the other side of the world, and he was doing arenas. And we see Joe Coy playing arenas now. I kind of think that the less you try in a way, the more likely you might be bigger than Chelsea Handler at some point. But it's really refreshing to hear that outlook. And the last thing I'm curious about, you mentioned your new album, which is out through Comedy Records. Barry, great guy running that team over there. Did you go to Comedy Records, or did Comedy Records find you?
I had known about Comedy Records, definitely, and then I didn't know how it worked with record labels. Like I didn't know that you could approach them. I thought it was kind of like agent managers. Like I thought they had to come and approach you. Yeah. So luckily he did approach me, but I'm good friends with Dina, who's Barry's girlfriend, and I think like a couple of years ago in the beginning of 2020, I got to go to Vancouver and record a taping for CBC Gem's new wave of stand-up comedy. And so that was my first ever TV taping. And then the pandemic happened like a month, like a couple of weeks after. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that we got to film this and that I got to do it. And, you know, like everything else paused. And I've been thinking, I remember like I talking to Dina one time, and she said how she really encourages comedians to record albums and do tapings because like the conversation came up about legacy and just kind of like you want to leave something behind and you want to just like document your work basically. And so I remember writing a post about the new wave of stand-up and just being really emotional about like I was able to record it before the pandemic. Right. And then I referenced Dina and what she said about legacy and all of that stuff. And then shortly afterwards, Comedy Records reached out to my team. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yeah, so we were in talks like in 2020, and then we didn't even end up recording until end of 2021 because of the pandemic. Like we were in talks in early 2020. So yeah, I'm just really happy that we were able to do it because we recorded it November 19 and 20. And then like a couple of weeks later, Toronto went into lockdown, and then I left in the beginning of January. So we literally recorded it in the nick of time, which I'm so grateful for.
And now we in New York are blessed with you. That's everyone wins, right?
Yes, definitely.
Exactly. Well, I hope to see you live in New York in the near future. But before I let you go, what is your home club, or which of the clubs we're likely to see you at in the New York area?
Oh, that's a good question. Right now I'm still kind of dipping my toes in many places, but I just out of statistics, I have done Tiny Cupboard in Brooklyn a lot more than any other show, and and I've done the stand a few times as well. So maybe you'll see me more there, or Comedy Records usually has showcases at the New York Comedy Club. So I've done one show there, so maybe like there as well. But I'm still kind of, building my roster, so to speak.
There you go. Wherever it is, hope to see you soon. And really, congratulations on this album release. Looking forward to whatever's to come.
Thank you so much.
Paltrocast.